The other day I just got a question from a commenter who comments pretty frequently, and I really enjoy his comments. But he asked me a question which I thought was actually a really good one, and it's a dilemma that I myself have faced in the past, which is, he said, which version of the New American Standard should I use? Now, the reason that he's asking this question is because he's actually thinking about switching and making the New American Standard his primary translation of choice. But if you know anything about the New American Standard, it's, especially recently, there's a little bit of controversy about it. And it has to do with the translation choices and additions of recent updates to it. So this person's question was, which one should I pick? Because he likes it, but he wants to standardize, but he doesn't want to standardize in a edition of the New American Standard that's not going to be available in print eventually, and he doesn't want to, invest, as it were, in a dead text. Not that you couldn't purchase one used, but he didn't want to invest his time and money into something that eventually will go the way of the dodo bird and not be a popularly used translation, which, that's actually a very good question and very valid. But I suppose I should rewind a little bit before I get to this and give you a little bit of background. So if you're not familiar with the history of the New American Standard, let me just give you the brief rundown version of it. So right now, here in front of me, I have the 3 major iterations of the New American Standard, okay? Let me actually go ahead and put them in year. So we'll start with the first one. The New American Standard was originally, they worked on it in the 60s, but it was initially, finalized in 1977, and that was the text edition that stood for a long time until 1995. So briefly, the New American Standard 1977 has something a little bit unique about it, which is whenever somebody is speaking to God or referring to God, or if there's a messianic passage in the Old Testament, they will use Old English, so these and thous. It'll never be a ye, because God is singular, so it will always be thee. And that's just an interesting thing about the New American Standard 1977. And in fact, the New American Standard 1977 is actually my favorite edition of the New American Standard, but we'll get into that later. So briefly, the New American Standard 1977 was the first real edition of the New American Standard. Now, the Lockman Foundation, those who own the New American Standard, put out an update of it in 1995. This happens to be my pit minion, and it's my one of my favorite Bibles, and it is a 1995 New American Standard. And what they did is they updated the English and made it a little more contemporary, as well as removing the Old English from the 77 that was in the 77. So whenever someone speaks to God, it will simply say you. It won't say thy and things like that. And so that's a major distinction between the 95 and the 77. Now, fast forward now to 2020, and this edition happens to be put out by Holman. My dad bought this for me. By the way, I've tried to find this particular edition, and I think you can't get it anymore, at least in the black, because I believe this one's a goat skin. So this was a limited edition. My dad's a big NAS guy, so he purchased this for me. We have matching volumes. But anyway, this is a 2020 New American Standard. And to say there's a little bit of controversy about that, the 2020 would be an understatement. And it primarily has to do with the conversation around gender. And I made an entire video about that. So to be honest, I don't really feel like getting into it right now. But suffice it to say, in the New American Standard 2020, they chose to change their rendering of certain words in Greek and Hebrew from gender-specific terms. So for example, it has to do with their language. In particular, let's say the New Testament, because that's my background, I'm familiar with Greek. So in the New Testament, whenever, instead of saying brethren, it would say brothers and sisters, when the context deemed it necessary, that they viewed it, that they were talking to a mixed audience. So, for example, when we say brethren, and in English, it doesn't necessarily mean brothers. It definitely has a broader connotation. So they changed that to brothers, and then they placed and sisters in italics. That way you know it's technically not in the text, but it's implied. And then also men, in certain contexts, when it showed that it was a mixed audience, they translated people or persons. So in a nutshell, that's what happened. They didn't do that across the board, only in certain passages where they believe the context deemed it necessary. So that is just, in a nutshell, the history of the 2020. Now, the question that this person asked is he wants to switch to the New American Standard, but let's say he's not necessarily the biggest fan of the 2020 and he really likes the 1995. Is it worth it for him to switch to the 95 when this is technically the old edition? And that's a good question. You don't want to invest in something that 20 years down the line is not going to be a popularly used translation, and you're out on a limb here and it's like today if somebody was using the ASV, the American, not the New American Standard, but the American Standard Version. Nobody uses that Bible anymore. Actually, funny story. There's a guy that comments on here from time to time, and honestly, it's so bizarre, but it cracks me up. But he says that real believers use the ASV, and every time I try to ask him why that is, he never answers. But at this point, look for it. I bet you he'll comment on here. It honestly cracks me up. I just never heard that before. ASV onlyism. Maybe he's kidding. I don't know. But it's almost like copy and paste. He says the same thing. But anyway, back to the thing. You don't want to invest in a translation that's not going to be popularly used. I mean, you can, but it's just, But the question is, or not the question, but something about the New American Standard that makes it unique is that the fact that when they update the different text blocks or the different texts, what they do though is they still allow the previous edition to be published, which is a little bit unique. For example, the ESV, the last update it had was in 2016, and they recently announced that it's going through an update as we speak. Well, when this current update is going to be published, the 2016 edition of the ESV won't be available. And by contrast, though, the New American Standard, you can still buy brand new 1977 New American Standards. Now, granted, they're limited. It's not a lot of editions. You can buy, I believe it's a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. You can buy it's called a large print Bible. There's another one I'm thinking of that I'm missing. But at any rate, there are some editions that you can buy brand new. But the fact that it's still being published at all is interesting because most Bible translations, like I said, when they update a text, they don't make the previous edition available. Now, fast forward to now, the 2020 is the current edition of the New American Standard. But again, it's so different from the 95. It's kind of unique in that the 95, when most people say New American Standard, they're referring to the 1995 edition. And it is so popular that right now the Lockman Foundation is still publishing the 95 as a current edition. And it's almost like, and this is my theory, it's almost like they're using them as sister translations. And it's as if when they made the 2020, it's still a formal equivalent translation, but it's a lot more dynamic. And so it reads a lot more like the ESV. A lot of people like the ESV and more than the New American Standard because they say it reads better. And the reason for that is because the ESV is more dynamic than the New American Standard. When I say dynamic, what I mean by that is the fact that instead of necessarily always doing word for word, sometimes they will shake it up. So in the ESV, they'll do, instead of one word equivalents, they'll come up with a couple or a phrase that would make the sentence flow better. And then it makes it roll better when you're reading it. And so that's why the ESV sounds more elegant and flows better. So what they did is in the 2020, the New American Standard Translation Committee chose to do more along that line. And so that's why the 2020 is honestly, is very different than the 95. It's not that I don't want to say they're so different that it's a different translation, but it gets very close. It's almost like if they said, hey, what if we took the New American Standard and we made it read more like the ESV or somewhere between the ESV and the kind of even like the CSB. So that's what the 2020 is. Now, The reason that the New American Standard is so popular all these years is because of its formal equivalence, its dogmatic stand on trying to be the most formal equivalent popular Bible used today. And that's really why the New American Standard is so popular. So it doesn't make sense to me that the New American Standard Translation Committee would then annex and get rid of the 95, considering how popular it is. Even considering the fact that you can still buy new 77s. This one's not new, it's an older one, but I do have a newer edition of the 1977. But the fact that you can still buy, even today, a 1977 New American Standard shows that they still make available popular use New American Standards. Now to the question, which one should you buy? In my opinion, I'll just go ahead and say it. Let me see. I'll just put out descriptives of people. If you like elegance, if elegance is your thing, and you like the beauty and readability, but also understandability, I would go for the 1977 New American Standard. Now, I've never had any problems reading my 77 alongside somebody with a 95. They're the same, basically. The difference being is that the 77 tends to be a little more formal, actually, than the 95. So it doesn't, it uses, like I said, those these and thous, and it uses a little bit older English in some words, but it's by no means difficult to understand. So if elegance is your thing, I would do the 77. You know, the New American Standard has always gotten a bad rap as being a wooden translation. I don't think that's true, but if you're somebody who's ever heard that and you want an elegant Bible that sounds beautiful, but is also very accurate, the 77, I think, you can't go any better than that. Now, let's say you're somebody that likes to have the most formal equivalent but common Bible, right? And you want a stable text, and there's a lot of editions available for it. Because like I said, the 77 doesn't really have that many editions. You can buy old used ones, but it doesn't really have a lot of, as far as different Bible publishers making it available, it doesn't really get that treatment. The 95, though, does. And really, it's anything under the sun you can think of, it's available in the 95. So if that's you, if you prefer accuracy on the formal equivalent side, I would go with the 95. And I truly, genuinely believe it's going to be made available for a long time. Okay, I don't see them making it go away, at least in our lifetime. You know, by the time that actually happens, I think you've got bigger problems and wondering of which translation of choice to use. So if you like accuracy, but a lot of current editions and popularly used, do the 95. Now, if you're somebody who likes readability, for example, you just want to read the Bible and have a standard text that's very accurate, then I would go with the 2020. Again, I think unjustifiably so, it gets a bad rap. And I don't think it deserves all the hate that it got. And again, I have a whole video about that, and I'll put that in the description below. But I really recommend you give the 2020 a try. Even if you're somebody who likes the New American Standard, just give the 2020 a try. It's not as bad as you think, okay? You know, a lot of people hated on it and they never actually read it. Now, granted, there are things in there that I'm not crazy about. For example, the Psalms don't roll well when they say how blessed is the person, you know, how blessed is the man who doesn't walk in the, so how blessed is the person. But, you know, then it just doesn't flow very well. And so, but again, it's not because they're trying to be gender neutral, but they're trying to be gender accurate. So again, I have a whole video about that. Not going to get into it. But if you want a popular edition of the Bible that's accurate, that reads really well, I would do the 2020. So in a nutshell, that would be my advice. Again, all three of these are still popular Bibles. And the 77 is more niche, but again, it's my favorite, but it's not weird. So when I read from it, nobody's ever looked at me and gone, what are you reading? They know it's the New American Standard. So at any rate, that would be my advice to you, which is just get the one you like and use it. All three of these are still popularly used. And so it's not something that you'd be out on a limb there, having an oddball translation. So at any rate, I hope this helped you guys out. And, as a parting comment really quick, my pastor, he uses the 95 and he found out that I like the 77. And he made it was really a dumb joke, but he goes, I use the 95, not the 77. And he told me that. And the sad thing is that actually kind of cracked me up. I actually thought that was really funny. I've got a problem. I'm a bit of a nerd, so Shane, if you're seeing this, just know that I'm just teasing you. So, at any rate, I hope this helped you guys out. So, God bless. Remember, read your Bibles. That's what's important, and make the Bible your hobby. Okay, I've said that before many times, but the Bible doesn't do you any good if it just sits on a shelf. But treat it like a hobby. Really dig in. So. At any rate, I hope this helped you guys out, and God bless you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.